how many questions there are.
Good afternoon. This is Muhammad Ayub, and my brother Manzoor is also with me, and we are looking forward to learning a lot from you all today.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome.
Yay.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Anna Chotzen. I guess let me just rename this so you know who I am. Yeah, thanks for taking your afternoon to be with us. We're going to jump right in because I know we have a lot to cover and time is precious. So I just want to welcome you all to this workshop, Grant Writing Fundamentals for Farmers. And it will be mostly led by our guest speaker, whom I will introduce in a moment. I just wanted to give you just a very brief intro to Viva Farms. For those of you who aren't familiar, we're a nonprofit farmer training organization based up in the Skagit Valley and in Woodinville outside of Seattle. So I know some of you on this call definitely know who we are. And for those of you who don't, we do a lot of training and education for beginning farmers. And the work that we do bilingually in English and Spanish. And so this workshop is being offered with simultaneous interpretation into Spanish. So if you prefer to have Spanish language interpretation for the workshop, you can opt to join the Spanish channel. And I'm just going to explain that really quickly in Spanish. Para ustedes que prefieren escuchar en español, tiene que seleccionar bajo de la pantalla hay una opción que dice interpretación y tiene que seleccionar la opción Spanish o español y ya puede escuchar todo el taller en español. Excellent. So this workshop is made possible thanks to support from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So we're appreciative of them. And I think without further ado, I will pass it off to Ginny Lang, who is our main speaker for the evening or for the afternoon. She has a lot of experience doing grant writing training and support for small businesses and nonprofits, and we're really excited to have her here today. And we have a lot of content to cover, and I would just offer that if you have questions throughout, feel free to put your questions into the chat, and I will be monitoring that. And if it seems relevant to the conversation we're having in the moment, we'll raise it. And if it's a more general question, we might wait till the end for question and answer. But please feel free to have this be as interactive as possible and to bring all of your questions. And then at the very end of the workshop, I will be making a few announcements about some grant opportunities and resources that are for farmers specifically. So stay tuned for that. So Ginny, I will pass it off to you, and I will, if you want to introduce yourself anymore, and then I'll share the screen.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here today. We'll call it afternoon. We're gonna call it afternoon instead of evening because it keeps us awake, right? So I have been writing grants for more years than you want to know, more than 30 years. And I've written hundreds and hundreds of grants. And I primarily work with nonprofit organizations. So you may hear me say some things that seem like they're for nonprofits, but what I want you to know is that when you're writing grants, I've also written grants and taught grant writing for businesses, but what I want you to know is the process is the same. The process is going to be about researching the grant, finding the grant, and then putting together the information that you need to go in the grant and following whatever they tell you to do. Even if you look at it and go, really? You're going to do whatever they tell you to do because you want them to give you money. So my name is Virginia Lang. Please call me Ginny. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm in Bellingham. I'm in Bellingham, which is the ancestral home of the Coast Salish people, and it is the home of the Nooksack and the Lummi tribes today. So we are going to start by sharing some slides and talking about grant writing. Again, you may put your questions in the chat, or you can save them for the end because we are going to have a time to do that at the end. So, or if it's something that's really pressing, if I have said something that confuses you or whatever, feel free to raise your hand and that will move you to the top so that Anna and I can see you. Because once we share the screen, we can't see everybody. So, but if you raise your hand, if you use the reactions button and you raise your hand, it moves you to the top of the screen and we can see you. Okay? So everybody ready? You got some handouts, so you have these slides. You have got these slides so that you can use them to take notes if you want to, or you can take separate notes, but you do have a copy of these slides. So let us begin. Anna, you ready?
Yeah, I will share the screen.
Okay. Or not.
Sorry, just 1 second. It's
It's all right. It's all right.
coming.
You're doing something
Oh,
here much
shoot.
more complicated than I usually have to do. Showing
I'm-
two sets of slides simultaneously.
I know, it's unfortunately we're having a little tech issue. So, Ginny, maybe if you want to go ahead and share your slides, I'm having a minor issue here. So why don't
All
you
right.
go ahead to start?
And then you let me know when you want me to stop and you want
Yeah.
to take over.
That sounds
All
great.
right?
Yep.
All right. And let me make these bigger. Slideshow. Start from the beginning. And there we are. Now, can you see it? Is there anyone who cannot see it? Please let me know that. That's easier. Anybody who's not here, raise your hand. I know. Okay. So grant writing nuts and bolts, and this is what we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about the basics of grant writing. This is me, and I've already said the things I was going to say here. So let us get started with this. Grant writing, there are some misconceptions out there about grant writing and about its role in business and its role in nonprofits, in both. And so what is it and what is it not? First, we're going to start with what it's not. It is not an instant solution. People often think that when you start writing grants, what's going to happen is you're going to write letters, you're going to send them out, and money's going to come back. And that's just simply not the way it happens. Many grantors are building a file on you, and it's going to take you more than once. You're going to want to get into their cycle so that you can continue to propose them. Grants come up in two different ways. They either come up on a cycle that happens every year, or they come up on an RFP, and many of your grants will come up that way. They come up on an RFP, which is a request for proposal, and that is the result of legislation that has triggered money going into allocations specifically for farms or specifically for whatever topic it's going into. It happens every year. Understand, they want to spend this money. They want to give you this money, because if they don't spend down everything that they have been allocated to grant to people, then they won't get their allocation the next year. So they want to give you this money. But understand, it's not an instant solution. There must be planning, there must be research, there must be cultivation, and there must be follow-up in order for there to be successful proposals. You need to know what they are looking for. And you also need to think about this as what you're trying to gain is not a donation, it's a donor. What you're trying to gain is not standalone support. You want to develop a relationship. You want them to know you. You want these grantors, even government grantors, to know who you are and what sets you apart and what makes you different. So even if you're approaching, there's always people behind it. That's what you have to remember. There's always a person behind it who's reading what you do. So it seems like it's institutional. It seems like there's that it's just mechanical, but it's not. Okay, so far? If you have comments or you have questions, please let us know. It is not a standalone function. Just grants are never going to support a business. Your primary source of support is your revenue. And it is your earned revenue, and it's that revenue that comes in, and it's an exchange of goods and services. And that's always going to be your primary. But there are other things too that you need to think about besides grants. There are partnerships where you can work with someone else, where you can cross over into the nonprofit sector, where you can work with other kinds of businesses. There are sponsorships where bigger businesses support smaller businesses. There are all kinds of things out there, collaborations. There are all kinds of things out there that you need to put a strategy in place. So it's not just business as usual and a grant over here every now and then. And I realize that that's a lot to think about, but what happens is you end up making a stable foundation so that you don't have to be thinking about that all the time. Okay? So it's an overall strategy, thinking about what you're doing going forward to support your organization. Now, I have put this in here that this doesn't pertain to you particularly, but this says the interpretive dance was nice, but all grant requests must be made in writing. Well, this is for nonprofits, obviously, a dance company that wants to get money and decides that they're going to go and they're going to dance for them instead of giving them a proposal. But what I want you to think about with this is that what you do, you're really good at, and you know you're really good at it. The problem comes up and the challenge comes up when you have to interpret it into another way, where you have to talk about it or you have to write about it. My husband's a jeweler. He works in 3 dimensions. And if he's going to go for a grant, or if he's going to go for a competition, or he's going to go for anything like that, he has to do, not only does he have his 3-dimensional piece, and that's what he does. That's what he's good at. He's been doing it for 40 years. He's really good at it. But now he has to take photographs of it. He has to reinterpret that 3 dimensions into 2 dimensions. And he has to be good enough at it that they can see what it looks like. And then he has to talk about it. Then he has to write about it. He has to be able to say what his artistic statement is. He has to be able to say what his mission is. He has to be able to say what his inspiration was. He has to be able to say why he does this. And of course, he's got me to write, but I never hear the end of this, because what you're having to do is take what you do and what you have chosen to do and what you do well, and now you have to change it into another form, and that can be challenging. So what I want to say to you with this cartoon is reach out for help. There is all kinds of grant writing help out there. There is all kinds, there are the small business associations, certainly the nonprofit sector. And although the nonprofit sector seems like it's real different, it's just a different business model. That's all it is. It's still a business. It still needs to make profit. It still needs to put its services and its goods out there. It is just a different business model. So reach out for the help in making that transition from what you do and what you do so well to what you have to do in order to make somebody else understand what you do. So that's my soapbox. I'll get off that now and go back to telling you what a grant proposal is. A grant proposal is a persuasive essay. It describes a need out there. What's the need for what you do? What's the need for farms? Why do we need, why are restaurants so into farm to table? Why is that so sexy? What is the need out there? It describes a need, and this persuasive essay sells a solution. It describes a need and it sells a solution, a specific solution that you're asking them to fund to meet this need. Okay, so it's marketing. It's part of your marketing plan. If anybody tells you that grant writing is not marketing, they've never done it. Because it is. This is part of your marketing plan. So you've got to be persuasive about what's the need out there and how am I filling that need. We're going to talk about that a lot. So it's a promise. A grant proposal is a promise. It is a promise that certain specific services, activities, goods, whatever it is, will be delivered to a specific clientele. Because you're asking for money to do something specific in a specific time frame. What's the key word there? The key word there is specific. And it's going to be the key word all through everything we're going to talk about today. Because writing a grant, one of your most important tools is to be specific so that they know exactly what you're asking for. One of the primary complaints that potential donors from the government down to, from the federal government down to the local governments, down to other businesses that work together, down to, whoever, one of the primary complaints, is that the ask, the application was too vague. And they couldn't tell what you were going to spend the money on. So they didn't give it to you. That is the primary complaint. The other one is that you didn't follow directions. And the directions, and a lot of yours are going to be government. And government grants have very, very specific directions. Sometimes government grants have very specific directions, but they also have more than one set of directions that tend to that seem like they contradict each other. And that's because government grants are written over time and they're written by more than one person or more than one department. So you must be prepared to ask questions. But it's a promise. A promise what? Specific goods and services will be delivered to a specific clientele. Okay. I see you watching, Anna. Are you ready?
There was a tech issue, so you keep sharing, and I just put the Spanish slides as a PDF in the chat.
Okay.
Thanks for checking.
Sure. Okay. What else is it? It is a presentation. It's a presentation. It's a presentation of your business. It's a presentation of your organization. And it's a presentation that shows it in the best possible light, the best possible truthful light that's going to interest that funder. When you put in an application, you have read the guidelines. You know what they're interested in. And those are the things that you're going to bring to the top. Those are the things that you're gonna say the most about, is the things that you know that they will be interested in, that are going to make you attractive to them, that are going to make you make you qualify, and then make you the most interesting proposal they've gotten. So it's a presentation. And it is a projection. It's a projection of the cost to run whatever project or whatever, if it's for your whole organization, or if it's a specific project of your organization, it is a projection of how much it's going to cost to run that for a specific period of time. You're always asking for a specific period of time. Even if it's something that's ongoing, something that never stops, you're still asking for a specific period of time, because that's how grants are structured. Grants are structured this is the money that's coming to you for the year, or this is the money that's coming to you for, this period of time. So it's an estimate. It's also a projection. It's a projection of an outcome, as well as the projection of the cost. It's the projection of the outcome. What's going to happen if they give you the money? What problem are you going to solve? What benefit is going to result from them investing in you? You have to tell them that specifically. What benefit? What's going to happen? And you can think about it in terms of what would happen if you didn't do it. What's not going to happen? That shows up the value of what you're doing. Okay, so I'm going to say it again. Specific is a word I used over and over. Clear, concise, descriptive. Clear, concise, descriptive language. Clear, concise, descriptive language. That's your best tool. Specific. And that's what funders most often complain about, is that it's not. That's what it's not. Okay? Do you have any questions or comments or observations so far that you want to share? It's a good place to take a breath. Okay. All right. Let us first start with planning. Planning, what do you have to get together when you're planning? And we're going to talk about two different things. We're going to talk about the finances. We're going to talk about putting together a budget. And later on, we're going to talk specifically about budgets. And you're going to see some different budgets. And you're going to see some different ways of thinking about putting together budgets. But what I want to say here is that talking about what you do, which is the narrative, which is the heart of the proposal, or some people would say the guts of the proposal. Talking about what you do comes first. And then you put the budget to it. Because you don't want to write your narrative. You don't want to write what you're planning and what you're visioning. You don't want to write that within the confines of a budget. You can always cut that. You can always cut some of that language and put it in another file and use it for something else if it's too much, because you're going to have a word count. They're going to tell you how many words you can use and then stop. They might even tell you how many characters you can use and then stop. But write it all first, get it all out of your head and onto the screen before you start to mess with the budget. And again, you can always cut that language back. You can always add to that language. But you don't want to write within the confines of budgetary restrictions. So the narrative, which is talking about what you do, and the timetable, this is the length of time that I'm writing about, that precedes this budget. And the budget's a projection. When you write a budget for a project, it's a projection, and you're writing it as though you got the money. Because that's what they have to know. They have to know, what does your budget look like? What are you projecting if we give you this money? It makes financial people crazy, but it's what you have to do because it's not real. A projected budget isn't real. It's what you think this is going to look like if you get the grant. So you begin that budget with broad strokes. You begin that budget with, okay, and we're going to talk about this in detail in a little while, but you begin that with broad strokes, with how much is this going to cost? How much are the people going to cost? How much is the equipment going to cost? How much is the supplies going to cost? How much is the whatever else you need to know? Packaging going to cost? How much is you begin with broad strokes and then you take it down into detail. I always recommend get it out of your head and get it onto the screen. And then come back and get detailed with it. Because it gives you something to start with. It gives you a place to start. And if you're writing a grant for a piece of your business, for one project, like for one, I don't know, what would one project be? For working with one specific population, maybe? I'm going to call that a program, a project. That project budget or program budget, which is what you're giving them because it's what you want them to fund, it must tie back to the overall budget for your entire organization, your entire business. You would have a budget for your entire business, and one line item on that budget would be this program. And then you take that and you detail that because that's what you're asking for. Okay, we're going to talk about that at some length in a little while, but I just wanted to, that's when you're planning before you ever start with the application, you have to be thinking about what's this going to look like? What's the whole thing look like? The other thing that you have to do in planning is the writing. And that actually should have come first. I'm sorry, those slides should have been reversed. Get the ideas down, then organize them. Do the writing, then do the budget. Flip these slides. Get the ideas down, all the ideas, everything you know about the topic, then organize it. Because if you try to write and organize at the same time, you're going to miss things. We all want our writing to come out perfect, and it's not. It's not going to. You have to be willing to write the sloppy first draft and maybe the sloppy second draft before it falls into order, before it starts to look like a real grant. Okay, then organize it. And the way I would organize it at that point is into the buckets that the questions in the grant force you to put it into. I would look at the questions and I would get it all down, get it all on the screen, and then see what fits into what question. And then you know where you have holes. And you know where you have to do more research. You know where you have to do more writing. If you have insider words that only another farmer is going to understand, don't use them. Use language, always write for an outsider. I think that's even the next slide. Always write for an outsider. Write for someone who doesn't know anything. Write for a first-time reader. That's a good way to think about that. So avoid initials, avoid acronyms, avoid things that only somebody on the insider language is going to know. Because you can't expect somebody else, you can't expect somebody else to know that if they aren't working in your same industry. You don't know what panels or areas of expertise or parts of the government or whatever, who is going to be assembled to review your grants. You can't know that. And they bring people in from different disciplines. So make sure that you're writing for a first-time reader. And don't write in a vacuum. You need readers. I always recommend 2 readers. You want one reader who knows a whole lot about what you're writing about. maybe more than you do, so that they can say to you, have you thought about this? Or maybe you left this out. Maybe you want to say more about this. You want somebody who can do that. Then you want a reader who knows nothing about what you're writing about, so that that reader can say, I don't understand this. I don't understand this. You need to make this clearer. Okay. So, and I think that's what this next slide is going to say. Yep, right for the outsider. Assume that your reader is hearing about your project or your business or your organization for the very first time. Okay, right for the outsider. Okay. Is everybody good? Does anybody need a break? Does anybody have questions? Everybody good? I can't see you all, so if you have anything, please raise your hand with the reaction button so it brings you to the top so I can see you. I can only see I can see like 5 people and that's it.
I'm watching the chat as well, so
Okay, thank you.
feel free to put your questions in there as well.
Great. Okay. When you write, you have 2 things that you can write about. You have 2 things, and that's all you have. You have stories and you have statistics. That's it. That's all you've got. You can, in a narrative way, talk about what you do. You can talk about the benefits of what you do. You can talk about the features of what you do. The benefits and the features. The features of this pencil are that it has a squishy place where you hold it. That's a feature. And it used to have an eraser up here. And you can press the button and it makes the lead come out. That's the features. The benefits of this pencil are that the benefit is that the lead is in there. You don't have to go and get more lead. You can refill this eraser that I've used up. The benefit of it is that it's easy. You can retract the lead and I can put it in my purse and it won't get marks on stuff. Do you see the difference between benefits and features? The features describe it. The benefits say why you want to use it. That's how you tell your story. You tell your story about, these are the facts. And these how the facts become human. You can add case studies in there. You can add, we tell a story about, we did this, we worked with this business, or we worked with this family, or we worked with this population, and these were the changes that we made. This is why we're valuable. This is why you want to fund us. And you can talk about, and this is why, and then you can talk about statistics, and this is why we're efficient. We're efficient. Statistics are always going to be how much, or how many more, or how much more than, or how much less than. Statistics are the numbers that go with it. But statistics alone are not going to convince anybody of anything. Now, the government, if you're proposing the government, always wants statistics. And they want you to lead with the statistics because that's how they keep track. That's how they get their money next year, is by numbers. But that's not how you're going to convince the reader to give you the money. It's going to be about telling them about your value, about the value of what you do, the impact of what you do. And then you've told that story and you've given them stories, you've given them statistics, and then you put it back into context. You put it back into context 2 ways. You put it back into context of This is how we fit in to the landscape in which we operate. This is how we fit into our community. This is how we fit into the other farms that are operating. This is how we fit into the communities we're serving. This is how we fit into, I don't know, the local farmers markets. You put it in context. This is our place in the wider picture. And then you also put it in context by tying it back to, this is why we started this business. This is what we want to see happen. We want to make this food desert not a food desert anymore. We want to make this go away. We want to feed these people. We want people to have fresh food rather than pretend food with preservatives in it and all that. We want to, these are the reasons. So it ties back in context to the landscape you're operating in and to the reason that you exist. Why do we do what we do? All right. This is that other thing I said, don't write in a vacuum, and realize that you need to proof what you do. When life hands you melons, you need a proofreader, because that's all the same letters that are in lemon. Okay. We are ready to talk about the components of a grant proposal. Okay, I know this is a lot of information. Anything that you want to, Anna, you got anything in the chat that we need to address yet?
Not currently.
Okay. Everyone's being so attentive and so quiet. Okay. The first thing, these are the components. These are the common components of a grant proposal, of any grant proposal. And we're going to talk about these one by one. And we're going to talk about what happens inside of these, each one. But before we do that, we're going to talk about that planning timeline just a little bit. Plan backwards from that grant deadline. You know when it's due. So if you've never written a grant before, give yourself a lot of time. Plan backwards. How much time do I need to put together the budget? How much time do I need to gather all the information to talk about what we do? How much time do I need to gather the information about who we work with? Or maybe gather the information about the people we serve? How much time do I need to do that? Plan backwards from your deadline, from your grant deadline. I need a week to do this. I need a week to do this. Okay, I know now I need at least 3 weeks to write this grant. And then add a week. Because in my experience, it always takes longer than you think it's going to. And also another piece of advice I'm going to give you is, if you are going to be, most grants, you are going to be submitting them online, and you're going to be submitting them through a grant portal. If it's a federal government grant, it's going to be through grants.gov. And submit it before the deadline. Submit it at least 3 or 4 days before the deadline. Do not wait until the day of the deadline. or the time of the deadline. Also, be sure that you know what time zone the deadline is in. And of course, of course, I have no experience with any of that. I have never pushed the button on a grant 5 minutes before the deadline. And I have never realized at the last minute that I was on the West Coast and the deadline was on the East Coast. So I had 3 hours less than I thought I did. Never, ever have I done that. So plan backwards from it. Make sure that you know when the deadline is and what time zone it's in. Use the organizing techniques to fill in the gap. Remember, I said you're gonna start with getting all of your information. Don't worry about how it's organized. Don't worry about what order it's in, and then go back and organize the information. Organize it into the grant if you can. If not, organize it into the categories that I'm going to give you here. And you want to make sure that it answers these questions. And these are the basic questions to every single grant. What are you asking for? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? Where are you going to do it? Who's going to do it and who benefits by it? Why are you doing it? That's what ties it back. That's what ties it back to the context. Why are you doing it? And how much is it going to cost? If you've answered all of those questions in what you have compiled before, even if you do it before you've ever looked at the grant guidelines or you've ever looked at that specific grant, if you have answered all those questions, you've got the information you need for the grant. You're way ahead of the game at that point. And let me take a moment to talk about boilerplate. Boilerplate is the language that you use over and over again, that doesn't change grant to grant, except perhaps in the way it's worded, but the information does not change. Some of the things, and you keep it in your computer so that you can pull it up and you can tailor it to any grant proposal that you're writing. And some of the things that you're going to have are your mission. Why do you exist? I say mission. As you know, I work primarily with nonprofit organizations. I say mission, but that's you have a mission too. A business has a mission. Why do you exist? Why are you doing what you're doing instead of doing something else? You want to explain that to somebody who's going to give you money. What are your general services? What are the things that you do always? What do you always provide? How do you go about doing that? What are your general services? Do you specialize? Do you have an orchard and somebody else has a vineyard and somebody else has what are your general services? What do you specialize in? What do you do? And then the biographies of the people who are doing what you do, the leaders, the leadership, particularly the owners, the people who are deciding how the business runs. And I would have bios rather than resumes. Because bios, you decide what's in it. And you can put 3 on a page and they can be little. It's probably going to be an attachment, which is one of the last things we're going to talk about today. And you decide what's important, and you decide what order it should be in. And you might change that order depending on what kind of grant you're going for and what the interest of the grantor is. You might change, what's in the bio, not what's in the bio, but what order it comes in. in the bio. Resumes are your full history, and someone who's reading it gets to decide what's important. So if you use bios instead of resumes, unless they specifically ask for resumes, if they specifically ask for resumes, that's what you're going to give them. But you use bios instead if possible, because you're controlling the message. And you always, always want to be controlling the message if you can. And then your statistics. Your statistics are part of your boilerplate because they probably don't change, but every season, maybe 4 times a year, maybe twice a year, maybe once a year, your statistics change. And that's probably volume. That's probably people served. That's probably geographic areas, but they probably don't change all that often. So it's part of your boilerplate. Okay.
Ginny,
Yes,
there are a few comments in the chat that I just wanted to put out if it's an okay moment.
sure.
Um,
I'm going to stop the share for a minute.
yeah, there's a
Ta-da, people.
comment from Dan that's interesting that I'd be curious to hear. I have some thoughts, but wanted to get your thoughts. That it seems like, to summarize, it's Dan's understanding is that generally funders have some kind of mission that they're trying to achieve, and that your grant proposal has to fit within that and sort of respond to that. So I'm just curious if you want to respond at all. And then specifically, Dan, to your point about farming being, yes, part of a social mission, but that there's specifics, that there are generally specific projects often that a funder wants to fund within farming. I would say that is often true, but that even still, whether it's the USDA or some private foundation, there are still likely to be there's overarching mission or objectives that the funder is looking to support, and even your specific, they might be interested in funding, let's say, value-added production specifically, but it's under an overarching umbrella of, let's say, farm viability for beginning farmers, and so there's still an opportunity to fit your story within that mission. Yeah, I don't know, Ginny, if you have anything else you want to add.
I've lost the question in your explanation.
Yeah, I mean,
what's the question?
It's more of a comment, and I don't know if you want to hop into the chat and look, but Dan writes, my understanding is that many grants are giving to help forward the mission of the granting organization, and therefore many applications seem to be about how or what we are doing to meet the goals and objectives of the granting organization. My story then would need to relate specifically to what the granting organization wishes to see happen.
Correct.
Ginny seems to be speaking in much more general terms that make sense for pursuing grants to fit larger social objectives. Certainly farming can be part of a larger social mission, but all the grants are specific.
Okay. Even if it's an RFP, if it's an annual grant thing, whatever it is, if it's money that has been allocated because of legislation, it has been allocated for a specific purpose. It has been allocated within specific parameters. And whether that's a larger social interest, or whether it's a specific outcome, like I did some grant. I did a grant workshop for the Whatcom Watersheds Information Network, and they're granting their grants that they're going for are primarily government grants, and they're for different segments of water conservation. They might be for lakes. They might be for salmon. They might be for mitigation of invasive species. They might be specifically for coastlines. They might be, but it all comes under the same it all comes under the same heading. If you're looking for grants, they're going to go and they're going to look and they're going to see grants for water, for water projects, but the specific legislation or the specific goal of that funder or that pool of money is going to determine how you write about it. Does that address? Do you think that does that address what you're saying? And I think it's going to be the same for you in that they're going to want to talk about a specific, maybe it's about, again, maybe it's about mitigating invasive species. Maybe it's about mitigating a specific something that's happening. Is it a kind of blight or something that's happening for a specific kind of crop? Is it a they're going to have specific interests.
Great.
So
Thanks. And Dan, if you have any follow-up, feel free to unmute or put
yeah,
your thoughts in
Dan,
the chat.
please do, because I want to make sure that I have addressed what you wanted to talk about. Okay. All right. Okay.
While we're stopped, one other question from Garrett.
And then we're going to take a break because we've been sitting for an hour and I'm not going to make you sit for any longer than an hour. Then we're going to take a break.
Great. So Garrett says, working in the agricultural nonprofit world, we tend to have many partners that are involved in getting and accomplishing the purpose of the grant. How common are joint applications for proposals, or does it just tend to be one primary applicant with other partners being included in the story?
Typically, it's one applicant, and you can have partners. You can have partners, you can have collaborators, you can have typically. Occasionally, you will see a grant where they will say there can be more than one lead applicant. But that happens, but it's rarer. So it's typically a lead applicant, and then you bring others who are working with you, collaborators along with you. Okay. Let's take a break because we're going to start on a new section here, and it's almost 4 o'clock. So let's take a break for, how long do you need? Well, 5 minutes, do you? Let's get up and move around, please.
Great. So we'll start again. Let's just say at 4, 5.5 minutes or so.
Okay, let's start again at 4.
Okay,
Excellent.
great. See y'all soon.
Thank you.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Jenny, I guess I'll just pass it back to you. If anybody, before we jump in, has additional questions they want to chime in with before we get started, feel free.
I am just reading Dan's question in the
Okay.
chat.
Oh, yeah.
I know that I will have to write to demonstrate that my goals and objectives match those of the granting organization, and this to me would be what writing a grant application would be about. Am I mistaken? No, you are not mistaken. You are, and also you're talking about the personal database, which is the boilerplate that I was talking about, and that is pre-grant writing, you're right. But most people, in my experience, don't assemble that until the first time that they're writing a grant. That personal database comes from the first time that they're writing a grant. They look at it and they see the information that they're going to need to put into that grant. And that's how that personal database, that background information comes to be. Some grants ask for the history of an organization, the history of a business. Some don't. When I teach grant writing on a long-term basis, on a 7-week or a 6-week thing that I do, and people write grants, I give them a grant to write, or I ask them to write something that they have found that they want to write that is as comprehensive as possible, so that they have to assemble as much information as they need. They may not need this information for every single grant, but you assemble that. If you're going to be writing a bunch of grants, then you're going to assemble information, and there are certain pieces of that you're going to have in different formats in your computer that you're going to pull to use for different kinds of grants and to answer different questions that come up. I wish you could unmute, Dan, because I'm not sure that I'm answering your question.
Yeah,
They want to know whether your story matches their purposes. Yes. And they also want to know how you fit into the larger picture of your community, probably, especially if they're the government. Okay. I know how to find grants that are best suited for a specific project. We are not talking about research today. As a matter of fact, we had some of that in there, but research is going to be, I'm going to show you something. Let me see, where is it? I think it's here.
I will, at the end, I will be mentioning a couple grant opportunities that are relevant
I
to
know.
farmers specifically, but it's not just to put that out there, Catherine, but I'm not sure if they'll be the best fit for you or not, but I will be mentioning a few.
I want to show you, I'm going to share again. I want to show you this. Earlier today, I did just a really quick search on grants for farms and grants for farmers. And this is what I came up with. This was a first level search. This wasn't even going into it. I got this from the USDA, grants and loans. Here's all the programs, ones for beginning farmers and ranchers, farm loans, grants and loans, all in one. Here's one that's from something called NerdWallet, Farm Grants and How to Get Free Money in 2024. Farm aid grants. This is the Farm Aid Organization. This is at Cornell University. This is smallfarmscornell.edu. This is a guide to farming, and these are grant opportunities for farmers. Here are beginning farmers and ranchers. This is farmers.gov. Here is more fun, and these duplicate each other, obviously. Some of them. Here's agricultural funding resources by topic. Here's, and like I said, this was just a first The USDA announces 133 million in grant funding available. This was just a first level kind of search. So it's out there. It's out there. It's about finding it. Okay. So anyway, I had done that and I saved that and I just wanted to show it to you. So there's lots of places to go and find where those grants are, but that was a first level Google search, was all that was. Okay, the components of a grant proposal. We had this right here. Cover letter, narrative, budget, and attachments. I want to start with the cover letter. Cover letters, sometimes you're allowed to use them and sometimes you're not. Sometimes there's a place for them and sometimes they're not. They are becoming rarer. As grants are becoming just online forms that have less and less true narrative to them, these are becoming rarer. But if they, but they're still out there. And if they let you use it, I would always use a cover letter because it personalizes what you're doing. It's a cover letter. It in a single page, it makes the initial ask and it summarizes very briefly the proposal and the credentials of your business. This is who we are. This is what we do. And if it's allowed, it personalizes because it gets to be, you get to address a person from you. And if it's used in a particular grant, they're going to tell you who you're addressing. You may be addressing, if it's a foundation, you may be addressing an executive director or a president or a chairperson. It might be the president of a committee. It might be the department, if it's a government grant that you're going to. I write some grants in Texas, and some of the government departments there still ask for a cover letter because they want to see you summarize this. They want to see you summarize what you're asking for. It also used to be common and is not anymore for there to be an executive summary. And that's pretty much the same thing, only maybe a little bit longer. This cover letter can also be called a transmittal letter. You'll see it called that sometimes. But an executive summary does pretty much the same thing. I would not write either one of these things until I had written the narrative. I would condense the narrative rather than trying to write the cover letter or an executive summary and then expand it. I would do it the other way around. And the executive summary just takes the high points. It takes like the headers from each section and summarizes them. And again, I don't even include an executive summary in the components anymore because it's that rare at this point. But occasionally you run across one. Write it from your full grant, not to your full grant. Okay, but a cover letter, if it's allowed, use it because it does personalize it somewhat. Makes you stand out. Okay. The opening ask in a narrative. And I still use this if there's room for it. The opening ask respectfully requests a specific amount for a program, project, or for the organization, the business. We respectfully, this business respectfully requests this amount of money for this purpose. It gets all that out of the way. They know what they're looking at. They know how much they're being asked for, and they know what they're funding. Then go on to talk about it. Our tendency is to talk, and then say, and so we're asking for money, this much money to do this. What you've done in journalistic terms is bury the lead. you have buried the purpose of your writing. So if there's room to actually say that, if many grants at this point are, they ask you a specific question, you answer it. They ask you a specific question, you answer it. They say how much money you want, you put a number in. They ask you a specific question, you answer it. If there is any leeway involved, how you get to, or sometimes there's a grant that says, we want to know this, and this. You have 4 pages, go. In that case, I would always use this opening ask format. You respectfully request a specific amount for a specific purpose. The following narrative sections can change positions, and it depends on the proposal requirements. But these are what these are the typical components, but they are often in different orders. If you're talking about a project, if you're talking about your organization, if you're talking about your business, obviously it already has a name. But if you're talking about a project and it's a piece of your business, name it. Name it something so you have something to call it as you repeat it in the proposal. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's the corn project. Maybe it's the orchard, the orchard discovery. I don't know. Maybe it's, but call it something. Call it something catchy, so that it's memorable enough that you hear it over and over again. Call it something short enough so it doesn't take up too much space and too many letters if you have character counts and word counts, which you will. Name the project. Name it something with 2 words. Okay? Then you're going to talk about the goals. The goals of your project or the goals of your organization. And they're going to have measurable outcomes with them. Okay. A goal is what the program will achieve. This is what we're trying to achieve. We're going to talk about this at a little bit of length because it's the hardest part and it confuses people the most. A goal is what the program will achieve, and goals are visionary and they might not be measurable. A goal might put you out of business. We're going to feed the whole community of Bellingham. And if you're up here and if you actually did that, it would put you out of business. But that can still be your goal. Your goal is visionary. Your objective is how you will know if your program is meeting its goals, if it's moving towards its goals. And objectives are always measurable and they're always time-bound. And I'm going to show you some examples. And they're going to be examples from things that other than what you do, so that it's not too tied, so that you're not correcting it in your mind because it's what you do. It's going to be about something else. Okay, so a goal is what the program will achieve. It's expressed in the present tense. We have provided fresh food for everyone in this community. It's already happened. That's how a goal is expressed. An objective, again, is how we know that we've done it. Objectives are measurable. Now I'm going to show you. Now I'm going to find this. had it up. And I may have closed it. When I put that, oh, no, there they are. All right, let's make this bigger. Can you see that? Can anybody not see that? You have this, by the way. This was distributed to you. So you've got this. Goals are broad statements, okay? Goals are visionary. They can be idealistic, and they don't necessarily have to be reached during the grant period. The goal for this project is this, and this, and we're going, and I'm asking you for money so that you can move me toward this goal. They can be non-specific. They can be non-measurable. BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. The objectives that go with them are the realistic. Now we go back into reality here. We're not visioning anymore. And the objectives are realistic steps to achieve the goals. They start with active, strong verbs. Or they include active, strong verbs. Action. They answer the what, the why, the who, the when. They can be validated. And they're clear. And they are smart. Do you know about SMART goals? They are specific. They are measurable. They are achievable. They are relevant. And they are time-bound. We're going to do this by this time. In this period of time, we're going to do this. In the next 6 months, we're going to achieve this many of these services. It's measurable. So here's a couple of examples, and they're different. They're not specific to your field. So all children have a playground within walking distance. That's what we've achieved. That's our goal. And what's our objective? We haven't said how we're going to do it, because that would come in the next layer. But we've said we're going to increase the access to playgrounds for children in Easttown by 2 playgrounds for the next 5 years. That's measurable. We know how many, we know how long. Okay. The next one's a little bit fuzzier. Asthma is no longer the #1 reason that children miss school. Okay, that's our goal. And how are we going to do that? All children in grades K through 3 who are diagnosed with asthma decrease their incidence of severe attack by 15% in the first semester. Okay, that's an objective. That's how we're going to get there. That's measurable. That's time bomb. It's not. That's time bound. But we haven't said how. That's going to come in the next layer, which is the strategies. In the one above it, increase the access to playgrounds. Again, you see, we haven't said how. We haven't said, how are we going to increase that access? We know how many playgrounds, and we know how what the time-bound element is. But we haven't said how we're going to do it. That's not part of an objective. Now, under that, we probably are going to put strategies. The strategy on that first objective, increase the access to playgrounds, might be something like there are bus stops at every new playground, or there are bus stops at every playground, or there is dedicated transportation available to each of those. And the third one here, all adults can read confidently to their children. Okay. And the objective here is 85% of first-time new parents in the Barrisville section of any town can read and have child-appropriate books in their homes within a year of their first child's birth. I find that a little early, but whatever. How are we going to do that? We haven't said that. Are we going to make books available? Are we going to supply tutors for parents who maybe can't read to their children? Are we going to, but this is what goals and objectives look like. And many people find this difficult, and they're asked for in almost every grant. So you think about what might your goal be, and then what has to be done? What might your goal be? That's visionary. What has to be done to what level in order to have made progress toward that goal? And then the third layer, which is not represented here, is how are we going to do it? What are the tasks? What are the strategies?
Ginny, there are a couple relevant questions in the chat. Do you mind if
Okay.
I read them?
No, go right ahead.
So the first is from Lily. Are there some grants that don't really have space for quote goals or broader statements? Thinking specifically of an RFP that I just looked at that has you pick one item from a list of outcomes and measurables. Seems that one didn't want to hear my broader goals and only wanted to hear exactly how I'd meet their specific objectives. Confused how I'd fit goals into a structure like that.
You wouldn't. If they don't give you a place to put it, you can't. If they just give you a pull down and you're selecting, then that's what you have to do. If there is a place, and there might be a place in the narrative section, which they probably call the project description or something like that. There might be a place in there where you don't have to label them goals and objectives, but where you can talk through that timeline in a couple of sentences. There might be a place to do that. But if there's not a place that says goals and objectives, you don't have to pull it out like this. But you still want to find a way to show them that you understand the continuum of this is my vision. This is what has to happen to move toward my vision. And these are the tasks that have to happen to make that movement possible. That's the continuum that we're talking about here. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, Lily says, great, thank you.
Sure. Okay.
And then the other one is from Olivia. I'm wondering if the goals are a part of the process for pulling out and clearly identifying your objectives. The goals maybe just kept internally while the objectives are the deliverable used in the grant. That's a question.
Yes. Yes. And when I'm writing a grant for a client, I like to share their vision. If there's not room to share their vision, I'm going to send the grantor somehow to their website so they can see the vision statement. I want the grantor to know why. And the why comes down to the vision eventually, or goes up to the vision eventually. And yes, you might not have a place to include that in the grant. When a grant asks you specific questions, you're going to answer those specific questions specifically. We often find ourselves writing around a question And if we find ourselves doing that and not specifically, always ask yourself, have I answered this question? Have I reproduced their language back at them? Have I answered the question? Have I parroted their language back at them? And if you haven't, it probably means you don't have enough information and you have to go find more information to answer the question. If we don't have enough information, we tend to write around a question. Does that make sense? But whatever they tell you to do, whatever the guidelines say, whatever the question is, answer it exactly, answer it as concisely as you can. What we're talking about here with some of this, what we're talking about here is the grant where they say, again, they say, these are the things we want to know. You have 4 pages, go. And you have to compile that. You have to create that. You have to actually write that. You're not answering specific questions. That's the hardest kind of grant to write. If you can write that, you can do any of the grants where there's boxes and questions. And I would challenge you to write that kind of a grant, because if you do, you know you can write any of the others. If you can create it, you can certainly parrot it back to them in their language. Okay? Did I answer your question? Okay. Let's continue. If you have more questions, you can always ask them. We have plenty of time. Okay. So that's what goals and objectives are. That's pretty much what they are. And again, I want my funder to know that I understand that continuum. Okay, methods. Your methods are your specific activities. This is how we're going to approach this. This is what we're going to do. This is the next layer down. This is the activities. This is the tasks. How are you going to accomplish this? What are the methods going to be? What are the steps going to be? What are the specific activities going to be that make me move toward this objective, that make this objective happen, that moves me toward my goal? That overlaps with the next one. It overlaps with logistics. The timeline, obviously the timeline is whatever the grant says the timeline is. Everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end, even if it's ongoing, because your grant, your request is specific to a period of time, because that's how much time the grant covers. It might be a year, it might be 6 months, it might be 2 years, it might be whatever it is. And the logistics overlap with the methods. The methods are, this is how we're going to do it, and the logistics are, these are the mechanics of the method. We're going to move this by bus. We're going to move this by truck. We're going to move this by, those are the logistics. And then there's the staffing. Who is running the actual project? And who's in the background? Is there somebody in your particular project? Is there somebody who has to take orders? Is that the same person who's doing the logistic, or is it a different person? It's the same person who's doing the who's actually running the project, who's actually growing, picking, packaging, the things that you do. But what kind of administration has to go with that? What kind of scheduling has to go with that, or answering the phones? What kind of scheduling, what kind of fulfilling of orders, what kind of paperwork has to go with that? Do you have questions on any of these? Something you may find, particularly with government grants, as you're moving through a government grant, is that it feels like they're asking the same question over and over again. It often feels like that. But if you read it carefully, they're asking the same question from a slightly skewed, just slightly different point of view. They're taking it and going. And that's because they want to know you have all your bases covered. They want to know how you're thinking about this from an administrative point of view. They want to know how you're thinking about this from a logistical point of view. They want to know how you're thinking about this from a staffing point of view. So it seems like they're asking the same question over and over. So you have to resist the urge to say, to copy and paste the same answer into the next box. Okay. Anything else, Anna?
Let's see, one just came through. Could you give an example of the difference between methods and logistics?
Well, sort of. The methods, there's not a big difference between them, and they might be interchangeable. The method of how you're going to do something is how it's planned. This is how we've planned to do this. The method is we're going to bring in a team, and this team is going to package this, and this team is going to package this this material, this food for distribution. That's how we're going to do it. The logistics are, we're going to bring this team in from this other location. We're going to bring them in by bus. We're going to have them here for 8 hours at a time, and then we're going to take them back to a specific location, or we're going to pick them up on a bus line, or we're going to keep them. Do you see the difference? And it overlaps. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't overlap. It does. This is the activity, and this is how we're going to do it. And I may go back and rename those. I don't like it. But anyway, this is the activity, and this is how we're going to do it. That's how you can think about those. That's how you can separate those. Okay. Okay, this is another part of the narrative that I want to talk about. And it's the case statement and the statement of need. And it answers the question why. And they both focus on impact. And impact is what you have to focus on in a grant, because that's why they're going to give you the money, is because of the difference you're making. And the case statement, if we were talking in terms of marketing rather than in terms of grant writing, the case statement would be the unique selling proposition. They are the same thing. But when we're talking in grant writing language, It's a case statement. This whole thing in some grants is called the problem statement. The difference, but if you think about the problem statement in these two pieces, it's a whole lot easier to write. The case statement is what's different about my organization, what's different about my business, what's different about the way I do this, what makes my organization the one that you should support instead of the other 9 proposals that you have in your inbox today. What sets us apart? What makes us different? You never trash your competition. You always talk about what makes you different, what makes you unique, what makes you not necessarily better, but more suited to what they're looking for, most suited to what they're looking for. This other organization does the same thing we do. This other farm grows the same things, does the same things. They do a really good job. And, you know, that's because they want to know about duplication. They want to know about that as well. But we do it this way, and we do this one thing that makes it unique. We do it, or we do it in a different order, or we do it in a different what makes us different? What differentiates us? Why support me instead of them? And then the statement of need makes that bigger. It elaborates on the case statement. It shows how you are meeting the wider need. The need is what's out there. What would stop happening if we weren't around? This is specifically how we do it. We and nobody else. That's the case statement. The statement of need is, why do we have to exist anyway? How do we fit into the wider culture? How do we fit into the wider landscape? How do we fulfill a need that we're all fulfilling? What's our niche in that need? And it includes statistics. It includes quotes from the experts. We need this kind of farm because this is what's happening out there. There's a food desert. We need this. And who is saying that? Is it the Department of Agriculture saying that? Is it an ag college saying that? Who's saying that? Quotes from the expert. The thing is that both of these focus on the need out there and the impact you're making, not on the need inside your business. If I need a new truck for deliveries, and that's what I'm asking for money for, and that's small, you're probably not, but that might be something. This is just an example, remember. If I need a new truck to make deliveries, I'm not going to talk about what's wrong with the truck. I'm going to talk about what's not going to happen if I don't have a new truck. I'm going to talk about the deliveries that won't be made. I'm going to talk about the impact, not about I'm going to talk about the impact on my clients, on my service area, not about the impact on my organization. Both of these things. It's about the impact that you're making. It's about the difference that you're making. It's about why your organization exists. All of this has to come back to that. All of this has to, because that's why they're going to give you money. You with me? We good? Questions, comments, observations? Think about the problem statement in these two ways, and you'll be able to write it a whole lot easier. Okay. And then there's going to be, this is more boilerplate, there's going to be the business information that you will need sometimes, and sometimes you'll need this part of it, and sometimes you'll need another part of it. But as it comes up, write it, store it away in your computer. It's like that boilerplate, the history of your organization. How did you get started doing this? Why do you do what you do? How did it happen? Your services and your primary activities. These do not change. These are your primary activities. This is what you do. It changes with the season. It changes with, this is what we provide. This is what we do. This is why we're here. Who your customers are. Who are you serving? And probably going with that is who you're serving. How do you get to them? How do you know that they need what you have to provide? And then the one that many businesses and almost all nonprofits forget to talk about is the economic impact of what you do. How does this impact the economy of your area? How does this impact? I mean, what else happens because of what you do? People don't have to, if I'm buying local, I'm not paying for all that shipping and all that storage and all that. What's the economic impact of this? And then how are you going to keep your business going? What is your sustainability plan? And that's the plan that you want to have for your business anyway. But you want to be able to share that. How are you planning on sustaining that? What kind of support are you going to have? Is it going to be primarily revenue? Primarily earned income, primarily goods and services traded for money? Are there going to be partnerships? Are there going to be sponsors? Are there going to be other grants? How are you going to talk about this? And again, this is more boilerplate information. Okay. Another portion of the narrative that you are going to be asked to is your evaluation. What is the measurement? How do you know you've been successful? What is how are you going to measure? What is the measure of success? How are you going to, is it going to be marketing data? Is it going to be volume of food? Is it going to be number of people served? What are your desired outcomes here? And how are you going to measure this? And how does it compare with independent measurements from other places, the national or the international, the independent measurements? How does it compare with what the Department of Agriculture says should be happening? How does it compare with what this one of the big ag colleges? How does it compare? I lived in Texas for many years. I think Texas A&M immediately. How does it compare? How does what you're doing measure against your desired outcomes? Because you want to give them this, because if you get the money, that's how you're going to have to report. And you're going to have to report with the same measurements that you told them you were going to use. So there has to be an evaluation section built in. And if they don't ask for it separately, it's probably built into your narrative about the project description. And sometimes they are very unreasonable about that. Sometimes, here, I want you to tell us all about this, and you've got 1,500 characters to do it in. And sometimes that's very difficult. And I would always suggest that you write bigger and then cut, because that's easier. If you try to write within a character count, it's like trying to write within a budget. It's much more difficult than writing it all and then sizing it to what you have to do. And then there's a conclusion to your narrative, and that summarizes in a few words, in a few sentences, the proposal's main points, and a paragraph or two to call attention to the future. It is your final appeal. It is your final promise. And again, remember, we're talking about one that you've written yourself. We're not talking about, if you may not have room for this. They may not give you a place to summarize, to wrap up your proposal. If you're writing it, think about how you read something. You want it to go through a logical flow and tell you how something is going to happen, and then you want it to wrap up at the end. You want a final appeal. You want a promise, a final promise. This is how we're going to do this. It is worth it for you to fund this. Because you are touching this many lives, or because you are, it's worth it. Maybe it's because we are the business of the future. Maybe it's because we are the employment opportunity of the future. Maybe it's because we're the ones who are going to save the planet. I don't know. There's a vision for you. Okay.
Ginny, we have another question in the chat.
Okay.
How is evaluation different from SMART objectives?
Evaluation is, SMART objectives are saying what you're going to do. Evaluation is saying how you're going to measure it. Your objectives are, this is what we want to do, and this is how many, this is the timeline we're going to do it in, and this is how many or how much. And the evaluation is how we're going to measure that. It takes those objectives and it puts them here, and it says, these are our objectives. These are the numbers for our objectives, and this is how we're going to measure it. We're going to measure it geographically. We're going to measure it by amount of food. We're going to measure it by how many people we serve. We're going to measure it by units of service, whatever that means, whatever those units of service might be. Did I answer your question? I want to make sure I do actually answer your question. So.
And then while Ari is responding, if they want to, another question from Isabel: how does being a new business change what to put in that business information section? Is there limitations in looking for grants for new businesses versus established ones?
If that's going to be in the guidelines, and when you're looking for, you're asking about research, right?
Yeah, that's more what it's about.
Okay. When you're looking for grants, typically once you get into one of the databases, if it's a government database or if it's I deal with foundation databases a lot. You probably won't deal with those very much, but if it's a small business database, whatever, it usually has parameters that you can put in there, keywords and like that. So you might be looking at just ones for new businesses, but I wouldn't limit that when I was researching, because some of them don't specify. I think more of them don't specify than do, to be honest with you. So until you've looked at the bigger section of grants for farms or grants for farmers or grants for agriculture, or grants for, so you've looked at those bigger sections, I wouldn't start narrowing it down. I wouldn't start my search with looking for something for a new business or an established business. I'd narrow that down later after I looked at the big picture.
Just to chime in briefly for farming in particular, generally speaking, for USDA programs, you need at least 1 year of having filed the Schedule F tax form, which is the farmer's tax form. Most programs, you need to have been filing Schedule F for at least 3 years. So that is just important to know if you're starting out. And then for some of the smaller or the private foundation grant funding that's available to farmers, at least here, to Ginny's point, you do have to check, but I would say more often than not, they want to see at least 1 or 2 years of business experience. And that's common across many of the ones that we have access to in this region. So worth checking. And yeah, just to keep that in mind if you are a startup business.
Okay. I know that in general, there are foundations out there that like to be the founders, that like to be, I guess that works very well for you, the seed money. And so there are some out there that like to work with new, because they like to be the ones who founded it, kind of thing. But there are fewer of those than people who like to work with established organizations. Okay, to your point, Anna, yeah. Okay. We're going to talk about budgets. We're going to talk about budgets for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to take another stretch break. So let's look at these, and then you have, and I have here, you have handouts that I gave you that are some samples of ways to look at budgets and ways to assemble budgets. But always remember that, like everything else in a grant, the budget format is going to be dictated by the grantor. They're going to tell you what that budget has to look like, especially if it's a government budget. And they're going to tell you exactly what it has to look like and exactly what you have to put in it. So the examples that I'm giving you are more about creating budgets for organizations, grantors that don't tell you exactly what it has to look like. The budget is about how much a project will cost and and they want to know what percentage you're asking for of your total budget. They want to know what percentage is going to be funded by this request. And this request is going to be included in your budget. Usually. Everything that I say here is unless it has to be ended with comma, unless they tell you otherwise. Because you have to follow exactly what they tell you to do. You don't want to ever get kicked out on technicality because you didn't follow directions. Sometimes, particularly with foundations, the directions are stupid. They tell you how big the margins have to be and what font you have to use. It was obviously put together by a third grade teacher. You know, they talk to you like they're talking to children, but you do it anyway because you don't want to get kicked out on a technicality, whatever that technicality might be. Okay, so this is the budget is the other half of the description of your project or your business or or the partnership or whatever it is you're writing about. The financial description is the projection of how much this is going to cost. Or if it's an existing budget, if they want to see the existing budget, this is what our budget looked like last year. This is what our income and expense looked like last year. What you have to remember is they can't tell from just that what the story is behind it. If something increased or decreased radically, you want to make sure that you add a note for that, so that they don't make up their own story about why that happened. The narrative isn't the whole story, nor are the numbers the whole story. You have to have both in order to understand any organization or any business. So it projects the income and the expense that's going to happen if you get the money. It projects what your budget is going to look like when that money comes in. And again, the format is dictated by the guidelines. They tell you what that's going to look like. And if they don't, I'm going to give you some ways to think about that, to wrap your head around that if you've not done budgets before. I had to learn budgets very carefully. My head works in words, not in numbers. I am not a numbers person, and I was terrified by budgets. And I had a mentor who came along and taught me how to back into a budget. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how much we estimate it's going to cost. And that's all it is. It's that simple. And it gets easier. It gets easier as you do it. Always take it a piece at a time. Always take it a little tiny increments at a time. Okay. Here are the way that they often break up a projected budget. It's often broken up into direct costs and indirect costs. And direct costs are the ones that are associated specifically with the budget you are proposing. Specifically with the one I'm going to show you is for a summer camp. Okay, and I'm showing you that one because it's not like what you do, so that you can see it, so you can look at it objectively. That's why I'm using the budgets I'm using, because they're from completely different kinds of businesses. Direct costs are directly what's associated with it. Indirect costs, and they often make you divide them up this way, are administrative or operational costs that might be shared with the rest of your business. That might be the marketing. That might be the office stuff that has to happen. That might be the scheduling that has to happen. While the direct costs are those associated specifically with the project that you're doing. I apologize. That's my house phone and I can't turn it off. It will go away in a minute. I might be able to mute it. No, it's going to stop in a second. Sorry, I apologize. I have silenced my cell phone, but there we go. Okay. And here are some examples of expense divisions and the way you might divide them up if it doesn't tell you how. You might divide it into personnel. I usually think about it in terms of people and stuff. Personnel, direct expenses, and those are the things that we talked about before, direct expenses, and those might include travel, it might include supplies, it might include, but the things that are direct, if it's the marketing for this project, then it goes in direct expenses. If it's the marketing for your whole organization and you're asking for a project, then it's probably going to go in administrative or core operating expenses. Okay. So direct expenses might be, I need extra space to run this particular program. That's not your overall rent. Your overall rent would go into your administrative costs. But if it's extra space that you have to rent for this particular project, it would go into your direct expenses. See where I'm going with it? Do you have questions or comments or observations on this? Okay, let us continue here. There will also be, in most grant proposals, there will be a place for a budget narrative. You have put the budget together, okay? You have put the budget together, and there are things in it that might raise red flags. There have been in a particular line item, there might have been a change. There might be an unusual line item that they wouldn't expect to see in a budget. You want to explain anything that when you look at the budget, you go, You look at a budget as though it were somebody else's. As though it were somebody else's budget. And you go, I wonder what that means. And so the budget narrative, they give you a box sometimes that says put notes to the budget here. Or sometimes they ask you to attach a budget, and part of that budget is going to be your notes to the budget. And if you do that, you might set it up with just a narrative at the end that explains it by line, or you might set it up like footnotes. If you set it up like footnotes, where you pull out a particular number, make sure that you use letters, not numbers, to pull it down into the explanation. Because if you start putting more numbers, the formatting can go south very quickly. In most grants that are done online, it's usually going to be a box, another box to fill out, where you have the budget and then you give them the budget narrative. And you explain line items. And remember that that box only carries budget information. Resist the urge to tell them more about your project there. And if you get a grant, you want to keep track. They want to know how you spent the award. And you make sure that you know what's going to be required for your reporting. And they will tell you that in the contract that they send you when you get your grant. And you want to compile that data as time goes by and not wait till it's time to report. And it might be as simple as dropping receipts into an envelope. It might be as simple as a spreadsheet. But make sure that you have the information assembled that they're going to want when you report on how you spent their grant. And make sure you do it over time. And don't wait till the end. And when you report, answer the questions exactly, just like you did when you were filling out the application. And to make sure that whatever evaluation measurements you told them you were going to use, that's how you demonstrate your success. Funders don't want their money back. They have already vetted you. They have already given you money. If your circumstances change, you need to let them know. In more than 30 years of writing grants, I think I have given money back twice. They don't want their money back. They don't want to do the paperwork, first of all. And second of all, they don't want to have not spent the money so that they get the allocation next time. So if something is going to change, or if you're lucky enough to do more than one grant and you get more money than you need, go to the second grantor and say, we've been lucky enough to be funded by you and by this other organization as well. That means that we can increase our output. That means that we can take our project, or we can take our organization and we can serve more people, or we can do it over a longer period of time. Will you let us do this? They're going to say yes. 9 times out of 10. 9 3/4 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. Just keep them informed. If something changes in a big way, let them know. And ask them if you can shift the money somehow. And they're almost always going to let you. Again, remember, they don't want their money back. They don't want to have to reallocate it. Okay. We are going to look at some budgets now. Actually, we're not. We're going to take a break for 5 minutes. It's been another hour. We're going to take a break for 5 minutes, and then we're going to look at some budgets. Okay, I will see you back at what, 12 after, something like that.
Perfect.
We are on the home stretch here.
Great. Welcome back, everybody. I don't see any additional comments so far, but I'll just keep putting them.
Yeah, I'm looking at them too, yeah. Okay. I'm going to close that or I will watch it the whole time. All right. I'm going to show you a few budgets here and just a few ways to think about budgeting. Your budgeting is going to be dictated probably by the grant. And what I'm showing you here are just ways to wrap your head around budgeting if they're not dictated by the grant. Okay? If you have to think about producing a budget yourself. So, and you have these. You have all these handouts. The first one's the one I started to tell you about before, which is a summer camp. Okay, and this is for a summer camp. This is a sample of a projected budget for a project. Okay, it is a simple income and expense budget. Income is always on top. It's an income-based budget. You always put the income on top and the expense on the bottom. This particular grant is for a summer camp, and so there is contributed income here. And incomes divided into revenue, which is earned income, and contributed income, which is unearned income. Okay? Your budgets are probably going to mostly consist of revenue because you are primarily for-profit businesses. So your budgets consist of revenue, which is the exchange of goods and services for money. In this case, there's only one thing that comes under revenue, and that's the registration fees. But in your case, it's probably going to be mostly this. And what's it going to come in? It's going to be in sales. It might be in memberships if you participate in those. And have people who are members and you bring them food packages regularly. I know that some of the local farms do that. But on this one, the reason I have used this, even though it is obviously a nonprofit budget, is because it gives you a way of listing all different kinds of things. So revenue, you're going to list your revenue, and that's very straightforward. Contributed income, in this particular case, this organization is a United Way agency. They get an allocation from United Way, and a percentage of that is going to this project. You might get a grant that's a big grant from the government, and you're only putting, and you have gotten that, and you are now starting a new project. Okay, and you're asking for more money to come to it, right? This request is for more money to come to it. But you have gotten a big grant last year, and a portion of that big grant is going to go towards this project. This is how you would list that. This grant came from the Department of Agriculture. It was a big grant, and a percentage of that is going towards your project. You can tell them what percentage if you want to, but in this case, this organization elected not to let them know how much their United Way grant was. Just that a percentage of it, which was $8,000, is going toward the summer camp. With me so far? Okay.
There's a question in the chat.
Yes.
Is total business income on this budget, or just what will be related to the grant?
This is related. This is total income for a project, which would be a piece of, no, the grant is right here. This is the grant request right here. This grant request is for $5,500. It's 12% of this project budget. The project budget is $45,900. You with me? Did that answer the question? Stop me if it didn't. Okay.
Yes, it did.
Okay. Okay. So this is the project. This is the projected budget just for the summer camp. This is an organization that does a lot more than just this summer camp. This is one project out of the whole organization. Okay. That means that this $45,900, which is the project budget for this, is going to be one line item on the organizational budget for the whole organization, the whole business. But this is the budget. This is the detailed budget for what we're asking for the project that we're asking them to fund a portion of. Okay. So that's how you would do that. You have another grant that came in, and a portion of that went to this project, and this is the percentage of it. For this particular thing, we're talking about individual donations, individuals who gave money toward this organization, toward this project. We don't list them individually. The only place we would ever list them individually would be to acknowledge them, would be to recognize them. Here, we just talk about donations that might or might not be relevant to you. This organization also has some special events. Those special events are a golf tournament and a dinner auction. It raises a bunch of money, and a percentage of that is going toward the summer camp. It's the same kind of representation as up here with the other grant. It's a percentage of a larger amount. If you want to, you can tell them what percentage. That means they know how much these events brought in total. If you want them to know that, then you tell them what percentage that is. this 13.4 is of what these events brought in. You can represent anything this way. It doesn't have to be these specific things. Then we have other grants, and I put 3 separate grants here so that you know how to represent them on a budget. Bank of America Foundation has been approached and it's pending. We don't know yet. And the request was for $3,000. We don't know yet. Walmart Foundation is a grant that we're preparing. We have not submitted it yet. It is in process. And it's for $1,500. Okay. The Whatcom Community Foundation is a grant that we put in and we got it. And we know how much we got and it has come through. It is secured. So these are the 3 ways that a grant can be at the present moment while you're submitting. It can either be pending because we have submitted it. It can be in process because we have not been submitted it, and it can be secured because we've gotten it. And this is the current grant application. This is the budget. This is the budget for what we're asking for right now. This is the budget this is going with. This grant application is 12%. It's a $5,500 request, and it's 12% of the 45.9. Okay, does that make sense so far?
We have a few other questions.
Okay.
First one is, can grantors require the whole business budget as part of a grant application?
Yes, they can, and it would probably be an attachment. We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Great. And the second question is it necessary to have estimates down to the cents for things, i.e. quotes for supplies, or is it a ballpark number okay, or is it grant specific?
It's usually, that's grant specific, but few grants ask for cents. They usually want you to round it, like I did here. But it is grant specific. There's going to be, as soon as I say that you never have to use the cents, there's going to be one out there that's going to ask you to. So, okay. Notice something else. This is a projected budget, so it balances 45.9, 45.9. It balances. A projected budget typically balances, and a funder expects it to, because it's projected. It's not real. It's projected. Okay, expenses. I have done what I talked about earlier. Here's the personnel. Here's the direct costs. Here's the indirect costs. Personnel is all the people. What I have done here is where I have salaried people and I have contract people, I have broken that out. Here where I have salaried people, I have put the percentage of their a percentage of their salary that's going toward this project, because this budget is for this project only. I haven't told them what percentage. And I have put employment taxes and benefits here that go with these salaries, this salary number right here, these go with it. Many times they won't ask you to break it out that far. You can include the payroll taxes and the benefits in this line item. But I broke it out here so you could see what it looks like when it does have to be broken out. This contract personnel is just for this project. They are counselors for the camp. There are 4 of them. They're going to make $3,000 each, and it's $12,000. Direct costs are the scholarships, the printing and copying, the equipment, and the supplies that are directly for this project. And the indirect costs are the administrative support. And that might be the person who answers the phones in the office. That might be the person who, whatever administrative support I need from the office, and they are also performing other things. and the total project expenses balance. And here, this is a nonprofit. You probably don't have in-kind donations. Some budgets make you put in-kind is goods and services that you don't pay for, that are donated. And some budgets make you include those in income and expense. If they don't make you, I always pull them out separately because that's not money and it muddies the waters. It's goods and services. They are in-kind donations to this value. 7,400. Okay. This is a pretty simple budget. I know that any of you could do this, but this is if you have to create a budget for a project. This is a good way to start thinking about it. Any other questions here?
Nothing in the
Okay.
chat.
Okay. Let me show you this now. This is a blank budget form for an organization, for the whole organization. Anytime you think about a budget that you're going to show somebody that shows what your organization, what your business is doing right now, you think in 3 years. You think in the most recently completed year, and that's actuals, those are real. You think in the current year, and the current year is still projected because we haven't finished it yet. Right now, our current year has, if you're on a calendar year, ours has just started. So it's a projected budget. It's not real. And then the next year. And at this time of the year, you might not even need the next year because you might be asking for money that is 2024 money. I doubt it. You're probably asking 2025. So you're going to have 2 projected budgets. And as the year goes on, this column, this year-to-date column, is the actuals. That's really where this is the projected budget for the year. And then year-to-date means what have we done so far? What does it look like so far? And at this point, it looks like almost nothing. Because we're only, a week into January, 2 weeks into January. Almost 3 weeks into January. So, last year is a completed year. That's not going to balance. That's never going to balance. It's real. Income and expense is not going to balance if it's real. There's either going to be a surplus or a deficit, one or the other. The projected budget is going to balance. It's going to be the same because it's projected. The year-to-date's never going to balance because it's real. And then the next year is another projected budget. So I've zeroed these out because I know they balance. There's not going to be any excess. There's not going to be any deficit. There's not going to be any surplus. It's a projected budget, so it balances. And funders expect it to. They expect you to project a balanced budget because you don't know. Okay. Income on top, expenses on the bottom. This one's divided into support and revenue. Okay. Questions? You can raise your hand if you want to too, and come to the top and I'll
One
you-
question. Would it make more sense for a for-profit farm to have expenses equal income?
Yes. That's the same thing. It's no different. It's the same. A projected budget balances because that's what the funders expect.
Yeah, is this funders for nonprofits would expect the expenses to equal income?
Yes,
But
if it's a
what
projected
about a
budget,
for-profit?
both, either,
Really
yeah.
interesting.
If it's a projected budget, it's expected to balance. They expect it to balance because it's not real.
And to clarify, is this would be just the budget for the specific project for which you're asking for funding?
No, this is for,
Oh.
this is for the whole organization.
Okay,
Because
I think that would be different than for a for-profit, because a for-profit business ideally has higher income than expenses. But at least in speaking from my experience of helping farmers with grants, if you are running a for-profit farm and you have your full budget and you have if you project revenue, but then you're speaking to why like the particular grant is serving a particular need kind of outside of your operating, it's okay to show that your revenue exceeds your expenses.
If it will let you. The form often will not let you. Yeah.
Okay.
If the form will let you, and that's how you want to project it, if the form will let you do that, that's fine. Many forms in grant packages will not accept a projected budget if it does not balance.
Mm-hmm. I think also there's both Melissa and Noah in the chat are bringing up the difference between a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. So depending on how.
And of course, if you're going to give them your profit and loss, if you're going to give them your P&L, if you're going to give them your balance sheet, if you're going to give them those, then they're going to be attachments and they are going to be real. That's different than if you're projecting a budget and you're having to put it in their form and their form won't take it if it doesn't balance. And that's often the case with grants. That it won't take it if it doesn't, because it's projected. Okay, we're gonna stop with that. All right, if you're giving them your real live P&L and you're giving them your real life balance sheet, then or your income statement or any of those. And they're called different things with different grants. They're called different things with different. Then they're looking at your real stuff. That's not a projected budget that you're making up for a grant proposal. Okay. So that is what I know. That's not true. That's not true. I got more. Let's talk for a second about attachments. About attachments and what grants want as attachments. They're going to want they're probably going to want they may want your financials. They may want your most recent tax forms. They may want additional budgets that are not included in the body of the grant. And we had a question on that. If it's a grant request for a project, they may also want your organizational budget. They may want your annual report. They may want your incorporation letters from the state. If you have the opportunity to use photographs, use them. Again, take good photographs. If we're talking about land or we're talking about buildings, if we're talking about capital projects, use photographs, use blueprints, but not big blueprints. I mean, use renderings, which an architect will almost always let you have. They want cost estimates from outside vendors. And letters of support never hurt. Letters of support from your community partners, letters of support from your local government, letters of support from your clientele. Letters of support from other donors, if you do other grants, that never hurts in any kind of grant situation. They may want to see how you have vetted various vendors for Lily, I see your question, and you can still attach, they sometimes give you a place to attach other information. If they give you a chance, it never hurts to attach letters of support if there's a place to do it. They ask for other information. Cost us estimates from outside. They sometimes want to see the way you have vetted, particularly if it's a capital project, if you're doing a building, if you're doing land, if it's any kind of a capital project, if you are expanding a building, if you are renovating, if you're doing anything like that, they want to see how you vetted. They want to see the estimates that you got from probably 3 vendors and which one you chose. For grant purposes, I tend to choose the middle one. Yes, some grants specifically ask you not to send letters of support. And of course, if they ask you not to, you don't. But if they don't tell you that you can't and there's a place to do it, it doesn't hurt. If they don't read it, they don't read it. If it's there, it gives you further credibility. Why would you not choose the lowest bid? Are you sometimes required to? Occasionally you're required to. Usually I pick the center bid unless it's obviously somebody I don't want to work with. And I choose the center bid because it doesn't look like you're cheaping it out and it doesn't look like you're going to spend the most money. So if they're all pretty much the same, I would choose the center bid unless there is somebody you specifically want to work with who has bid, and then, choose the one you specifically want to work with. And you can tell them why, because you know their work, or because you are, because you have worked with them in the past, or, there was also something in the chat about references, that they wanted references. And yes, applied for a grant that had a field for references, name, phone number, and email. What would be the best list there? The best list there would probably be, I wouldn't go for somebody who has an obvious connection with you. I would go for somebody who looks the most objective. That would be the best list there. The references that look the most objective and that have the most name recognition, that's also always a good thing as well, that are perhaps larger or that have a credibility like a university, like a professional organization that is a membership organization, maybe a statewide organization or something like that. A novel about John? Okay. What else? Do you have any other questions about attachments? You're going to send them whatever they want, but they're always going to want your organizational documentation, your business documentation. They're always going to want that. And the rest will vary depending on the kind of grant that it is and the kind of stuff that they ask for. They're always going to want your tax information. Okay. And then my final thoughts for you are again, once again, the most common mistakes. The most common mistakes are not following directions and being too vague on what you're on your ask. Those are the most common mistakes. Those are what we hear most often from grantors, all the way from government grants to everybody else. Some grants require letters of inquiry, letters of interest, letters of intent. And it's really nice when they require that, because a letter of intent means that you are summarizing your request in a shorter form or in an actual letter, and that they then ask you for a full proposal if you pass that first sort, if you will. So a letter of intent is nice because it means that you don't have to write a full proposal. But it also means that you have to be ready to summarize your request. It's more like an executive summary. And again, it's an LOI is what you will hear it called, and it's a letter of inquiry, interest, or intent. And some government grants have them. And some larger funders have them as well. In terms of follow-up, when I send in a grant request and I receive something that says the grant request is there, I usually send an email, send something that says, thank you, you received my request. And if you need any further information or have any questions, please let me know. Just so that they have, you know that they have that contact information. And the other kind of follow-up is if you get a reject letter, I usually answer a reject letter and say, thank you very much. Is there an opportunity to talk about the panel comments? Is there an opportunity to talk about the proposal and ways to make it better? Is there an opportunity to talk about that? Is there an opportunity to have a conversation? And sometimes they will let you do that. Sometimes they offer that when they send you a decline. I know they do on the state level. I have talked to them many times on the state level. When a grant hasn't made it. And also often when they send a decline, I will send something back that says, thank you very much for your consideration. See you next time. Can we have a conversation? If not, see you next time. Thank you for your consideration. You want to always keep it on a peer level. That conversation is on a peer level. Not a, we are asking, excuse me, we are asking and you are giving. So that it's like this. You want to keep that conversation on a peer level. We are a business talking to your business. Sure, I can repeat. The most common mistakes are not following instructions. And this is for Laura, she asked. No, it's not. It's for Catherine. Could you, not following instructions, not following the guidelines specifically, and not being specific enough in your ask. being vague in your ask, so they can't tell what their money's going for. Exactly. Those are the two most common mistakes. Do you always hear back if a grant is rejected? Not always. Usually you get some sort of an email or a letter. I guess that's not 100%, but rarely do you not hear back something. And if you don't hear anything back, they have usually told you in the guidelines that you're not going to hear unless you have been granted. Usually you already know that you're not going to hear anything. Okay. Well, that is what I have for you.
Great.
I had a question, just
Sure.
like in your experience in general, what would you say are the key things that grantors look for in an application?
Specificity. And that you have read the request, that you're answering the questions specifically, that you are answering the questions and not writing around the questions. Think about Rebecca, is that you? Yeah. Rebecca, think about parroting their language back to them. They ask you a question and you answer the question with their language and then continue answering the question. That's always going to put you in a good space with them because they know that you have read everything. They know that you have been diligent about looking at, what they sent you. Anybody else? All right.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny.
You are most welcome.
In the last final couple slides, I want to share some information about some farm specific opportunities. Jenny, I have to ask you a big favor. I am having a tech issue and I can't share my screen, so I just sent you my slides.
Oh, okay. You emailed them to me, or did you?
I emailed them to you. It's your presentation, but they're just tacked onto the end.
Okay.
Just
Let me get to
and while
it.
Ginny is doing that, I'm also going to put a short evaluation into the chat that it would be much appreciated if you all could take a couple minutes at the end to just fill out the evaluation and give your feedback. It's really helpful for us as we're designing workshops like this to get your feedback and incorporate it to continually improve the education that we provide. So I'm going to put that in now. And yeah, appreciation in advance for taking the time to do that. And then as soon as,
I'm getting there.
okay, yeah, no rush. As soon as it goes, I
I'm
will.
getting there. I'm downloading it. Okay, here we go. There's that.
And the evaluation, just not to scare you, it shouldn't take more than a couple minutes. So thank you so much.
Okay, let me put this over here and this over here. No, wait a minute. There we go. Get down here. What's that? Make it a slideshow, make it from this slide. And here we go.
Amazing.
Got it?
That's great. Thank you so much.
Sure, just tell me when to change them.
Perfect. So again, just wanting to give a couple opportunities that are upcoming. This first one is the most it's coming most imminently, so it's due on February 19th, and it's through the Tilth Alliance. They're the ones who kind of facilitate it. And this grant is really all about supporting farms that focus on environmental sustainability. And there can be a lot within that, but really their priority is to support farms that are that their farming practices in some way contribute to kind of ecological stewardship. It's up to $10,000 and it can support a lot of different projects. And I kind of put the general priorities here, and these are just some examples, but it can really be a lot of different options within environmental stewardship, soil health, you know, creating biodiversity, increasing biodiversity, etc. And we at Viva Farms, we've supported a lot of farmers to successfully get this grant. So it's a great opportunity. I'd say it's less competitive, only in the sense that it's for Washington State only, whereas a lot of other, at least grants that are intended for small scale farmers are national in scope or at least regional, and so the competition is higher. So I would say there's like a great chance. You have to have, I forgot to put, oh no, I do. Yeah, have been in business for 2 years at least. So that's one limiting factor. But we're thinking about if you have a project that, even if it's, you know, we've had farmers apply for maybe like a specialized tool or a particular practice or cover crop seed or compost. So it's things that you may be intending to spend money on anyway, but that really contribute to kind of ecological stewardship or restoration on your farm, that this particular funding opportunity could help support. So that is one, and I'm just going to put the website for it in the chat here. And then when I send out the email with the recording, I'll make sure that all of the links to these opportunities are there as well. But again, it's February 19th. And it's fairly, I would say that the biggest lift is in the narrative side of it. The budget is, you definitely need a budget, but it doesn't need to be quite as detailed as some of the ones that Ginny showed. So it's definitely, it's pretty accessible for you, even if you don't have a lot of experience writing grants. Next slide, please.
Okay, I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
Here, you would, what we were talking about, giving them back their language, you would say something like we enhance and measure carbon sequestration by, or we restore soil health by, and that's how you would talk about that in the various questions.
That's
So,
great. Thanks.
sure.
So this next one, this is a federal grant through the USDA, and this grant comes up annually. It's due this year on April 16th. And the whole purpose of the value added producer grant is to support producers to do some kind of value added product on their farm and with product that they grow or produce. And what's interesting and kind of important to note is that I know for a long time, I thought of value added products as some, like it had to be jams or it had to be, you know, like dried pepper powder. But in fact, a lot of sort of particular marketing strategies can count, the USDA counts it as value added. So if you're marketing your product as local or certified organic, or you're running a CSA and you're doing some kind of creative marketing around that, it can count as a value added product. And so there's a lot within that, especially if you are an organic farmer or kind of a smaller scale localized farm business. It can be really relevant. I don't know if Melissa is still on the call, but Melissa Meller does a lot of work, I know, on this particular grant, and also NABC, the Northwest Agricultural Business Center, provides a lot of support to farmers on this particular grant. So I would encourage you to potentially reach out to them if you would like support. It's a big federal grant, and it's a pretty big lift to apply for. It does require at least 3 years of Schedule F filing, so you need to have been in business for a couple years to be eligible for this. The one interesting thing, as mentioned here, is that there's both an implementation and a kind of planning or feasibility grant. So if you're kind of thinking about a particular value-added product or strategy, you could go for the smaller one to just do the exploration. If you already have something in mind, you could go for the bigger one. So again, I'll put more resources into the email I send out, but a good to think about for maybe not the first grant you write, but down the road as you're thinking about growing your business. Next slide. And then the environmental incentives quality program, known as EQIP more commonly, it's through the NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is part of the US Department of Agriculture, the USDA. And EQIP programs, again, focus on sustainability practices, but some of the key ones are high tunnels. They can pay for high tunnel acquisition, and it's a reimbursement style grant. So that would mean you would purchase the high tunnel and then get reimbursed through the EQIP funding. They also do they cover different like buffer zone establishment and other forms of kind of like soil and property restoration, leading toward, like it says here, improved soil health, improved kind of like air quality, water quality, habitat restoration, etc. So there are a lot of different programs within this, and the process is that you would contact your local NRCS office, get connected with them and within the local FSA, which is the Farm Service Agency, and is kind of the financial arm of the USDA. You get connected with them locally, kind of work through the idea that you're like interested in submitting an application for. Then they would do a site visit, and it's kind of an iterative process. So it's not just an application form that you just fill out and submit. It's a little bit more of a back and forth process, but with it's not really, the reason that you would not get accepted is not because it's competitive. It would just be because your project doesn't fit within the EQIP guidelines, and then you could adjust them and likely again eventually get the funding. So also a really interesting one, and it's eligible for both farms that lease and own land. So some programs require that you own your own land, but for this one you can lease it. And a lot of farmers at Viva Farms have benefited from the EQIP program, so it's a great one. I think for this one I would have to double check, but I'm pretty sure you only need 1 year of Schedule F filing, so you're even eligible sooner. Next slide. And final slide, I believe. Yeah. So these final two resources, and again, you'll have these links when we send them out. These are just two companies that they're pretty similar. They provide both like farm specific bookkeeping software is kind of one piece that they do, but what's relevant to us tonight is that they also have a funding library for farm specific grant opportunities. They're both membership based, so you have it depends on it's anywhere, I think I want to say it's $30 or $40 a month maybe, so it's not cheap. And that, so it would only be, if you also wanted the bookkeeping services. But what's interesting is that they have a whole kind of online library of different agricultural focused grant opportunities, and they're constantly updating it with new ones and sending out notifications about different opportunities. So it could be interesting to at least explore and find out, kind of have an initial call with them, find out if what they offer could be relevant to you and your business. And yeah, I've spoken quite a bit with both companies, and they seem interested in talking with individual farmers, and they're trying to ultimately get you to use their service, but that means that they're willing to chat with you and kind of help you understand whether or not their product could be useful to you. So I will send those out, and yeah, I believe that's the final one. My contact info is here. I kind of support on everything to do with capital access and kind of access to financing here at Viva Farms. So if you have follow-up questions, Ginny is clearly the expert, but for more like farm-specific questions or opportunities, I would be happy to chat or follow up. And yeah, beyond that, that's all I have. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time to spend with us. Thank you in advance for filling out our little evaluation. We really appreciate it. And then most importantly, thank you to Ginny for all of your expertise
Thank you.
and sharing it with us.
And you have my contact information too. So if you have further questions, feel free to email me.
Excellent. And I will, so this has been recorded. Also tomorrow I'll send out the recording, the slides, all of the handouts, and then all of these resources that I just mentioned, and then contact info so you can follow up as needed. And with that, wish you all a wonderful evening.
Have a great evening. Thank you all for your kind attention and for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
And thank you, Anna.